This is the true-to-life story of a woman who had nothing, no savings, no plan, no way out, until she changed one single habit. She started waking up at 5 in the morning, every single day, no exceptions. And in exactly 94 days, her entire life changed direction. What she did with those early morning hours is simpler than you'd expect, and harder than you'd think. I'm going to walk you through exactly what she did, hour by hour, rule by rule. But before we start, tell me in the comments what time it is for you right now, and what city you're watching this from. I read every single one, and I want to know who's actually here at the start of this journey with me. In a mid-sized industrial town, where the trucks rolled through at all hours, there lived a 29-year-old woman named Priya. She worked the overnight shift at a parcel sorting depot, scanning packages onto conveyor belts from 9 at night until 6 in the morning. Her paycheck barely covered rent on a small studio above a laundromat. The building's heating rattled and occasionally quit entirely in the coldest months. She kept her work boots by the door because there was no room for anything else, and she'd learned to sleep through the sound of delivery trucks idling outside her window at odd hours, because that was simply when her body had been trained to sleep, daylight hours, while the rest of the town was awake and moving. Priya didn't feel lazy. She felt something worse, invisible. Walking home each morning as the sun came up, she passed the same bakery, the same bus stop full of people heading to office jobs in pressed shirts, the same parents walking children to school. She'd watch all of it through the haze of a 12-hour shift, thinking the same thought most mornings: is this simply what my life is going to be? She'd applied for other roles, anything with better hours, anything with a path forward, but she'd left school at 16 to help support her family, and every application seemed to hit the same wall: no diploma, no experience, no interview. She wanted to learn something, anything, that might open a door. But after a 12-hour overnight shift, her body had nothing left to give except sleep. Her younger brother called most weeks, and it was always some version of the same conversation. "Priya, when's this going to change? You've been doing this for 6 years." She always answered the same way: "Soon. I'm figuring it out." She wasn't figuring anything out. She simply didn't know where to start. The part that stung the most wasn't the exhaustion; she could handle exhaustion. It was the specific, quiet realization that hard work by itself wasn't moving her anywhere. She showed up every night. She never missed a shift. She scanned thousands of packages, walked miles across the depot floor, stayed sharp through the coldest hours of the night. And none of it was building toward anything. She was working extremely hard inside a life that simply wasn't going anywhere, and every morning when she collapsed into bed around 7 and slept until early afternoon, she felt like she was living the day backwards, awake while the world slept, asleep while the world worked. One thought kept returning, quiet and persistent: there has to be a different way to do this. She just had no idea what it was. She'd tried, in scattered ways, over the years. A weekend course she couldn't finish because she fell asleep during the second session. A resume she'd rewritten a dozen times without ever quite sending it anywhere, because some part of her had already decided in advance what the answer would be. She wasn't undisciplined, she was simply running on a schedule that left nothing over for anything except recovery. You cannot build a second life out of the leftover fumes of the first one, and for years, that was the only fuel she had access to. What made it harder was watching her coworkers treat the arrangement as permanent, the way people eventually stopped noticing a persistent ache. A few of them had been on the overnight shift for over a decade, and they talked about the day shift the way people talk about retirement, a distant, theoretical thing that happens to other people, eventually, maybe. She didn't want to become someone who talked about her own future in the hypothetical tense. But she didn't yet know what the alternative looked like, either. The morning everything changed started with a phone call she almost didn't answer. I'll tell you exactly what happened on that call, and exactly what a stranger on an early bus told her 3 days later, because that conversation is the entire reason the rest of this story exists. It was a Thursday in late autumn when Priya's phone rang just as her shift ended. It was her brother. Their father had fallen at home and been taken to the small regional hospital. Nothing life-threatening, the doctor said, but he needed rest, monitoring, and a level of care their family's budget hadn't planned for. Priya took the first available bus to the hospital, a 2-hour ride that felt endless. Her father was awake when she arrived, embarrassed more than injured, apologizing for making a fuss. But it was what he said next that she carried with her long after that day. He took her hand and said, quietly, "I worked 40 years at that plant, and I kept telling myself I'd figure out something better once things settled down." Things never settled down, Priya. Don't let that happen to you too. She sat with him until he fell asleep, then walked out of the hospital into the cold, dark morning air. It was just past 5. The town was still asleep, except for a handful of early workers already walking toward the fields at the edge of town, and the distant sound of a single bakery truck making its rounds. Standing there in that quiet, unfamiliar stillness, something in her simply decided. Not dramatically. Just clearly. Enough, she thought. Whatever it takes, I'm finding another way. On the bus ride back into town, she noticed a man across the aisle, maybe in his late 50s, reading a paperback with a cup of coffee balanced on his knee, completely at ease. She recognized him vaguely, Mr. Okafor, who ran a small chain of hardware stores in town and was, by local standards, quite successful. What struck her was the time. 6:15 in the morning. A successful business owner, riding a regular commuter bus, at an hour when she assumed people like him were still asleep. Something made her speak up. "Excuse me, why are you up this early?" He looked up, smiled, and said simply, "Because I've been waking up at 4:30 for the last 22 years. This time of day is when I actually get anything done." She asked if he wasn't exhausted. He said he was asleep by 9 most nights, which more than covered it. Then he glanced at her uniform and asked what she did. When she told him, overnight shift, sorting depot, he nodded slowly. "So you're awake while the world sleeps, and asleep while the world works. That'll keep anyone stuck, no matter how hard they're working." He leaned forward slightly. "Let me tell you something that changed my life a long time ago. The hours between 5 and 7 in the morning are different from every other hour in the day. That's when you can quietly build the life you actually want, while everyone else is still dreaming." Priya felt something she hadn't let herself feel in a long time, hope, and it scared her a little. "But I work until 6 in the morning," she said. "I need to sleep sometime." "Then restructure it," he said simply. "Sleep the moment you get home. 6:30 to 11:30, that's 5 hours, enough to function. Then live your actual life in the hours after that, while the world's still awake around you. If you can eventually shift the night work altogether, even better, but start with what's possible right now." He wrote a number on the back of a business card. "If you're serious, call me. I'll show you exactly what to do with those hours. But only if you're serious, because this takes a kind of discipline most people give up on by the second week." That evening, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Priya did something impulsive. She called the number. He answered on the second ring, sounding entirely unsurprised, as though he'd half expected the call. "Most people never actually dial the number," he said. "You already did something most people don't. That's a start." He told her to meet him in 2 mornings, at a small diner near the depot, at 6 a.m. sharp. Not a minute later, he added, half joking, half not. She almost didn't go. She stood outside the diner for a full minute before walking in, feeling faintly ridiculous, a grown woman about to take life advice from a stranger she'd met on a bus. But she thought of her father's hands, and the specific way he'd said, "Don't let that happen to you too," and she pushed the door open. "Before we go further, I want you to actually answer this, not just think it and keep scrolling. If you had 2 completely protected hours every single morning, before anyone needed anything from you, what is the one skill or project you'd finally build?" Type it in the comments. Be specific. I promise you, reading through the replies on a video like this is one of the most motivating things you'll do all week, because you'll see exactly how many people are standing at the same starting line you are. Let's pause the story for a second, because what happened next is really the entire mechanism of this whole video, the specific system Mr. Okafor gave her, not vague encouragement, an actual structure. They met 2 mornings later at a small diner near the bus depot. Mr. Okafor arrived exactly on time, already on his second cup of coffee, looking over a folded newspaper. He got straight to the point. "Priya, think of your life like a house," he said, sliding a napkin toward her and sketching a small, rough outline. "Right now, the house is unstable, drafty, unfinished, barely holding together. Why? Because you've never had time to work on the foundation. You've been too busy just surviving inside it." He tapped the napkin. 5 to 7 a.m. That's foundation time. While the rest of the world is asleep or just stirring, you're building something underneath everything else. He did the math out loud, the way she later realized he probably did for everyone he mentored. 2 hours a day. That's 14 hours a week. About 60 hours a month. Over 700 hours in a year. He wrote the numbers clearly on the napkin. That's the equivalent of roughly 18 full working weeks, nearly 4.5 months of extra time in a single year that almost nobody else is using. Her eyes widened at the number. "In 1 year," he said, "you'll have built 4.5 months that most people simply sleep through. Here's exactly what you do with those 2 hours," he continued. "This part isn't optional. This is the actual system. Hour 1, 5 to 6 a.m., you build a skill. Something with real earning potential. Not scrolling, not half-watching something in the background. Actual focused learning. There are free courses for almost anything now. You have no shortage of material, only a shortage of hours, and you're about to fix that." Hour 2, he explained, was for the body and the plan. 30 minutes of movement, walk, stretch, whatever keeps your body from breaking down under all this. Then 30 minutes reviewing what you learned, or planning your actual day, instead of reacting to it. He gave her 3 rules, and made her repeat them back. Rule 1, no negotiating. 5 a.m. means 5 a.m., every day, weekends included. The moment you allow just this once, the whole system collapses. Rule 2, protect your bedtime as fiercely as your wake-up time. You cannot borrow against sleep forever and expect this to work. Rule 3, the first 2 weeks will feel unbearable. Your body will resist. Your mind will invent excellent-sounding excuses. Push through anyway. By day 21, it starts to feel normal. By day 90, it simply becomes who you are. He looked at her seriously. "I'm giving you 3 months. Come back to me after 90 days and show me exactly what you've built. If you've genuinely done the work, I'll personally help you find something better than the depot. If you quit somewhere along the way, there's no need to call me again. This only works for people who show up on the mornings it's hardest." Priya asked him, before they parted, why he was doing this, mentoring a stranger from a bus, for nothing in return. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Someone did this for me, 22 years ago, when I was running a market stall and sleeping 4 hours a night out of sheer panic. I told him I'd pay it forward exactly once for every person who was serious enough to actually show up. You're that person this year." It wasn't sentimental, the way he said it, matter of fact, almost businesslike, which somehow made it land harder. The first week was miserable in a way she hadn't fully prepared for. Her body fought her every single morning. At 5 a.m., in the dark, she'd sit at her small kitchen table with her phone propped against a mug, working through free bookkeeping tutorials. She'd chosen the skill deliberately, because every business in town, including Mr. Okafor's, needed people who understood numbers, and it was something she could learn without a classroom. By day 12, she nearly quit. Her eyes burned, her focus drifted constantly, and nobody around her understood why she was doing this to herself. But she kept a photo of her father, from that hospital morning, propped against the same mug, and some mornings that was the only reason she got up. Around day 20, something shifted. She woke up 4 minutes before her alarm, and for the first time, she didn't feel dread, she felt something closer to readiness. The tutorials started making sense. She finished her first free certificate in basic bookkeeping by the end of month 1. Her morning walks, initially just a way to stay awake, became something she genuinely looked forward to: the empty streets, the specific quality of 5 a.m. light, the quiet feeling of being the only one awake and building something. By month 2, she'd completed 3 separate courses. She'd lost weight from the daily walking. Co-workers at the depot started commenting that she looked different, steadier, somehow, even on 4 hours less sleep than she used to get. "What changed?" one asked. She smiled and said, "I'm rebuilding my life 2 hours at a time." In month 3, she finally used what she'd learned. The depot's inventory system was a mess of spreadsheets nobody fully understood, so she quietly rebuilt it from scratch, organizing months of tangled data into something her supervisor could actually read at a glance. He noticed immediately. "Priya, who taught you to do this?" "Nobody," she said. "I wake up at 5 and teach myself." Word moved up the chain faster than she expected. There was a moment, around day 60, that she almost didn't mention to anyone afterward, because it embarrassed her slightly. She'd had a genuinely bad night, an argument with her brother about their father's care costs, followed by almost no sleep before her shift, followed by an alarm at 5 that felt, that particular morning, like a personal insult. She sat at her kitchen table, phone in hand, and seriously considered going back to bed. What stopped her wasn't willpower, exactly. It was the specific memory of Mr. Okafor's voice saying, "Everyone says that," when she promised she wouldn't quit, a small, needling doubt she didn't want to prove correct. She opened the tutorial anyway, understood almost nothing that morning, and closed the laptop 20 minutes later feeling like the session had been wasted. It hadn't been, she realized much later. Showing up on the worst morning, even to accomplish almost nothing, turned out to matter more than any of the genuinely productive mornings that came easily. On day 89 of her 5 a.m. mornings, her supervisor called her into his office. The company was opening a small logistics and accounts role, day shift, better pay, work that actually used what she'd built instead of what she'd survived. "It's yours if you want it," he said. She called Mr. Okafor that same evening. "I did it," she told him. 94 days. "I didn't miss a single morning." There was a pause, and then his voice, warm and unmistakably proud. "I knew you would. Now don't stop. 5 a.m. isn't a strategy anymore. It's just who you are." "I won't stop," she said. "This is who I am now." Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking, because it's a completely fair question. This is inspiring, but I have kids, or a health condition, or a job that genuinely doesn't allow this kind of schedule shift. What then? That's real, and I don't want to wave it away with easy optimism. The specific hours, 5 to 7, aren't a magic formula. What actually mattered in Priya's story wasn't the exact clock time. It was the principle underneath it: find 2 consistent, protected hours where nobody else has a claim on your attention, and use them on something that compounds. For some people that really is 5 a.m. For a parent of a newborn, it might be a different 2 hours entirely, or even 1 hour split differently. The specific window is negotiable. The discipline of protecting some window, consistently, for months, is not. Don't let the exact hour become an excuse to opt out of the entire principle. So here's exactly what to take from this. First, find your 2 hours, wherever they actually fit your life. Not the hours that sound impressive, the hours you can genuinely protect, consistently, for the next 90 days. Second, choose exactly one skill to build in that time, ideally something with real earning potential, not something vague like self-improvement, in general. Specific and narrow beats broad and unfocused. Third, pair it with something physical, even 15 minutes. Your body is the one asset every other goal depends on. Fourth, protect your bedtime as seriously as your wake time. This entire system collapses the moment sleep becomes negotiable. Fifth, Commit to exactly 90 days, on a calendar, with a specific check-in date. Not, I'll try this for a while, an actual, dated commitment, the way Priya had an actual person to report back to on day 90. 1 year later, Priya was the depot's lead accounts coordinator. She'd saved enough to move her father into town, near proper medical care, into a small 2-bedroom apartment with working heat. And every morning, at 5 a.m., she still woke up, not because anyone required it anymore, but because those 2 hours had become, in her words, sacred. That was when she learned new software, read, planned the next version of her life. Co-workers sometimes asked why she still did it, now that she'd clearly already succeeded. She'd smile and say the same thing every time: success isn't a place you arrive at. It's a practice you repeat. Mine just happens to start at 5. Her father, for his part, never fully understood the mechanics of what she'd done, the tutorials, the spreadsheets, the specific vocabulary of bookkeeping and inventory systems. What he understood was simpler: his daughter visited on Sundays now, not exhausted, not apologizing for having no news to share. He told her once, almost offhand, that he no longer worried about her the way he used to. She didn't tell him that his one sentence in that hospital bed was the exact reason any of it had happened. Some debts you repay by simply becoming someone, rather than by saying anything about it out loud. Priya's story is proof of something simple and, I think, genuinely underrated. Your life can change starting tomorrow morning, not someday, not once conditions improve on their own. The gap between where you are and where you want to be usually isn't talent, and it usually isn't even effort. It's what you do with the hours before the rest of the world wakes up and starts making claims on your attention. Mr. Okafor, as far as I know, is still riding that same early bus most mornings, still reading his paperback, still occasionally noticing someone tired enough, and honest enough, to ask him the question Priya asked. He told her once that he doesn't go looking for people to mentor. He just answers honestly when someone happens to ask the right question at the right hour of the morning, and lets the rest sort itself out from there. So here's your challenge, the same one Mr. Okafor gave Priya. Tonight, set an alarm for a specific, protected hour, not sometime early, an exact time, and decide, right now, on exactly one thing you'll build in that hour for the next 90 days. Drop it in the comments. What will you build in your first protected hour tomorrow? I'll be reading them. And if you know someone who keeps saying they want to change but never quite starts, send them this video. It might be exactly the nudge they've been waiting for. Success isn't a destination. It's a daily practice. And yours can start tomorrow, at whatever hour you're brave enough to protect.